Welcome everyone to the newest installment of The Last Rep. I'm Bob Ciccarello along with my partner, Mr. Peter McGuff. Peter, I'm going to get right down to it because we have got a great response from the first two shows that we did. Over 4,000 people cannot be wrong, Peter. They absolutely love The Last Rep and what we're bringing to the table. Your thoughts on the first two shows?
Well, I think the enthusiasm that people are showing has been tremendous. Of course, a lot of that's down to me having 300 aliases and posting on the board. But yeah, I mean, we seem to be developing the show along the right lines. And I got to say, all kudos to you, Bob, because you started to talk about doing this show 4 years ago. And here it is. It's become a reality now. And it was your idea, your vision, and now here we are.
Well, I'm pacing myself. It's clearly taken me years to get here, but for various reasons, which we'll get into at a later date. But I do want to thank everybody out there that has been responding on the boards and in the bodybuilding community. We greatly appreciate it. Peter, this will come as absolutely no surprise to you, but our biggest demographics, other than the U.S., like Hasselhoff, my friend, I am huge in Germany.
Germany, yeah. England, Germany, like that.
See, we have an alliance already, so that's a good thing. But we thank everybody for watching. We're on YouTube, of course, and of course you can catch us exclusively over at musculardevelopment.com. Peter, getting right into it, a lot of the response that we got was in regards to the Arnold Seminar that I was fortunate enough to kind of find myself face-to-face with the man himself. You go back a long way with Arnold. Maybe you can tell our viewers when it is you first met Arnold and the friendship that would become in many years to come.
Hey Bob, I'm more interested in the experience of you sitting down face to face with the Oak for an hour in front of 4,000 people. Just tell us about it.
Well, it was an interesting story, Peter, because I got a call from Jim Lorimer about 6 weeks out from the show, and he was interested to know if I would be willing to do the Arnold Seminar. Now, by that, I figured he meant probably be holding a microphone out in the front and that type of involvement. But he says, no, we're looking to revamp the entire process. And, we like what you do with the Olympia, and various things we've seen you in. So we want your ideas. We want your input on how to make this a more grand event. We don't feel like we're getting the biggest bang for the buck that we can get out of having Arnold there. So, of course, I accepted immediately. And just the idea of having the ability to, make something different, perhaps have a chance to maybe talk with Arnold. Little did I know, Peter, that it would turn into a 1 hour, one-on-one, mano-a-mano with me and the big man himself, Arnold, right in the center stage because they changed it. It used to be over at the convention. Now it's at the Vet on the same stage that Arnold won the 1970 Mr. World competition. And we've got a few clips to share with the audience about how that all went down with me and Arnold. How about a great hand for the governor, Arnold Seminar. Well, from third place to first place, we don't horse around here at the Arnold.
That's right.
That guy thinks I'm funny.
Arnold, that was a funny line. You should be proud of that.
Hey, Arnold liked that, okay?
Maybe it's better than next.
You never know.
It was a matchup.
Does anybody here have a good Arnold imitation? Anybody, you want to judge somebody
Sure.
doing you?
Absolutely.
Anybody got the guts to do an Arnold imitation to Arnold?
Do it. The funny thing is that it's every year when they come through here, I hear people imitating a different line. So like sometimes some years it is, Arnold, I'll be back. Or Arnold, hasta la vista, baby. But now this time it was always, get to the chopper. Get to the chopper. So I don't know how they switched from one to the next, but everyone when they went through the halls, there's this Arnold, get to the chopper. Whenever I come back here, it gives me these fond memories of having experienced a really well-organized competition that Jim Lorimer was responsible for, but also at the same time that it was a tremendous amount of energy, just as we saw yesterday. Packed auditorium, a tremendous amount of energy, and it gave me this great satisfaction of being the best bodybuilder at that time and winning the second championship in 2 days. So it really made me feel good. So it's good memories coming back here.
So there it was, Peter. Me and the Oak, center stage, history in the making. I got almost an hour with the man himself right on the stage. What'd you think, Peter? How'd I do?
That was terrific. You really got on with him and asked the right questions and got him going. I mean, it was there was a lot of information there. There was a lot of laughter as well, so it was really entertaining.
Now, you know Arnold, and you guys go way back. You're very much friends with Arnold, as most of us can't claim. But was that the real Arnold that we saw? I mean, he really seemed to open up. He enjoyed the old stories, and you know, as you can hear, the audience absolutely just erupting with laughter. And some of these imitations that he had of Joe Weider.
Oh, yeah.
By the way, of course, as you saw, I had to give you kudos for your Joe Weider impersonation, which you still got at tops. I think you still do a much better imitation than Arnold certainly did.
Oh, I don't know about that. Yeah, no, Arnold is a prankster and a funster. He loves humour. From way back as a youngster, he was like that, and he's like that. Even, you know, as governor, he's always ready for a laugh. I've interviewed him many times, but one of my most memorable was spending a whole day with him in Sacramento, going round him as governor in all the different functions and everything, and seeing how it went down. And that evening, we went to a premiere of Be Cool. This is 2005 with Dwayne Johnson, Cedric the Entertainer. I introduced myself as Peter the Writer. He thought that was hysterical. He'd never heard anything like it. But and that night there, I'm sitting next to Arnold in the cinema, eating popcorn. So it was quite a memorable day.
Absolutely. Well, it was quite a memorable day for me, as you can imagine, Peter, as this is not something I really fully expected to kind of come fruition. I thought they might take a few of my ideas and kind of, you know, it would be kind of the standard that we've seen, which is Arnold at the podium, you know, doing his speech to everybody, which is nice and all.
Yeah.
But this was engaging. It was fun. It's something I definitely like to expand. So I hope I get the invite back next year, because I tell you what I'd like to see. I'd not only like to see Arnold himself out there, but I can see a whole panel of a lot of maybe the old greats coming out there to share some stories and some of the greats of that era, because I think that era really defined what modern bodybuilding is today.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to name drop, but I did spend another evening with Arnold where Dave Draper was there, Franco was there, Frank Zane was there, Dick Tyler, who used to edit Muscle Builder Power back in the 60s, he was there. And the stories and the humour was priceless. I said we got to film this. We never got round to doing it, but that would be a magnificent idea to get them all together.
Well, these guys are always at their best when they're actually, you know, they know each other from way back. So they're not all superstars. It's, you know, they're themselves to them. So they always come up with some great stories from the old days, which we enjoy hearing. So, well, big thanks to Jim Lorimer and his crew out there, because they did a fantastic job. And really, this is a 364-day-a-year job for them. This is something that they go back. They're actually meeting right now about next year's format. And next year, as you know, Peter, the 25th edition and anniversary of the Arnold Classic. So I'm imagining that they're going to have a whole bunch of special things that are going to be taking place. And I'd certainly like to be a part of it. With that, Peter, we're going to move into the 5-part series for those who don't know or weren't able to attend. We have a 5-part series right on musculardevelopment.com that you can see. You can pop right on there. We've got it split out for you guys so you can catch the entire seminar and see how it all went down. I'm sure you guys will enjoy that. Peter, we're going to move right into what's going on now currently in the bodybuilding world, and we're on to the next show, and that, of course, is the Australian Pro. What do you got on this one, Peter?
Winner, Branch Warren.
All right, moving on. Branch Warren, your winner. We're forecasting that right now. Not a deep lineup, Peter, on that, but obviously we're going to keep our tabs out there. Big thanks to Tony Doherty out there, because he puts on a great show every single year for these guys. Not the deepest lineup, but that will bring us into our next segment, and that, of course, is going to be on the qualification changes that are taking place. And Peter, we're going to run down all that and what the champs can expect this year on the circuit after this break.
MD Supplement Superstore. Number 1.
All right, back from the break. Bob Ciccarello along with Peter McGuff. Peter, we left off with talking about the qualification process. Now, this is something that's in the works of being revamped. The powers that be are busy at work, because I think it's kind of time for a change when it comes to who qualifies for the Olympia, not having 30, 35 guys there, which is not really the intent of why that contest was put on 46 years ago. But Peter, you've kind of seen it from day one till now. Your thoughts on the qualification process system. Is this something that needs to be revamped at this time?
Yeah, this change is overdue, Bob. I mean, the lineups were getting too big at the Olympia. Of course, what we have to realize as well is that there are more shows these days. So the old system of the top 3 qualifying, this is where you've got a glut of competitors on the stage. And streamlining the lineup ups the quality of the competition. Plus, guys having to qualify means they're going to have to compete in more contests, which is good for the fans. So I think it's a win-win situation.
Now, and let me ask you about that, Peter, because we talked about that as its importance to the federation, not just the individual promoter or the competition. But you need some of these big names out on the circuit. What we've seen traditionally is guys would pre-qualify, and in the old days, Peter, as you know, top 10 qualified for the next year. Now, that got reduced to top 6. Now it's been reduced to top 3. I can see the day coming, and I personally believe that it should only be the winner, just like they do with the Masters in golf.
Yeah.
You win, we'll give you the free pass. But to me, I want to see every big name that we have out on the circuit because I think it's good for business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you get a top-class competitors doing the Arnold Classic early in the year. They qualify. We never see them again. And then the middle-year shows have lineups that are not so good. For instance, say if just the winner of the Arnold won, it would be Branch Warren. Let's forget about Wolves qualified before. He'd have to go on somewhere else to earn a qualifying.
That's right.
So that would be the benefit of a particular promoter and a set of fans who normally wouldn't see Dennis competing.
Right, and I think that's important. Again, we're talking about the federation as a whole. We're talking about the IFBB, and we're talking about really just bringing the brand out to as many people as we can. But let's face it, Peter, the superstars sell. You need those big names out there, just like in any other sport. To bring that brand of IFBB professional bodybuilding out to the masses. And they do bring in big numbers. And when you see numbers, I mean, we saw last year, Peter, Kai Green at the New York Pro. Now, this is not a show that we would normally see Kai Green competing at, but because he failed to qualify at the Olympia the year before, he needed to requalify. That was huge for Steve Weinberger and that New York Pro show because that place was packed to the gills because they got to see Kai Green on that stage. Now, if we take that and kind of just move it along down the line with every show throughout the year, I think we can have the same response at every show, be it the New York Pro, Tim Gardner's PBW competition, or any new show that comes down the pike. They've got an opportunity to get some good talent there.
Yeah. It'll be very interesting to see how it pans out and if it works, the formula to get guys into more shows, top-class guys.
Well, Peter, we're going to have more to report on this next week. As I mentioned, the powers that be are working on this as we speak. The details are being worked out right now. The whole qualification system is going to be overhauled, and I think it's going to be a very good system for all involved, and we'll keep tabs on that next week. Well, Peter, some of the breaking news that we saw come out this last week was Jay Cutler undergoing the knife and getting surgery on that torn bicep that we saw at the Olympia. Don't know if that quite hampered his ability to win the title. Phil Heath was pretty formidable at that show, and of course, that's a whole discussion for a whole other show. But it did bring up a few questions, and that is Jay Cutler going to return to the stage? Should Jay Cutler return to the stage? Obviously, by way of him getting the surgery is indicative of nothing because nobody wants a torn muscle group no matter what you're doing. But Jay's so busy with appearances and being out there and being the consummate professional with appearances and guest posings that he's actually had to delay the surgery to this until just last week. That said, Peter, do you think that Jay Cutler is putting himself in a position to return to the Olympia stage?
If you'd have asked me after the Olympia, I would have said he's done. He's going to retire. He's got nothing left to prove. He's got 4 Sandows. He's 38 years of age. He said he was going to retire when he's 34.
Right.
Absolutely nothing left to prove. But I think, in a strange way, he's probably viewed the Branch Warren situation. Here's a guy with a torn quad has come back in 6 months and won the Arnold. And I think the competitiveness of Jay will drive him to maybe do the Olympia to prove a point. He's always got to have a battle. If he comes back at the Olympia and in his best ever, he doesn't really have to win to prove a point and to write another chapter in history. Well,
this kind of leads to some good discussion because on both sides of the coin, you could probably come up with as many reasons why he should come back as to why he shouldn't. And anytime you talk about the Olympia, we had the same conversation about Ronnie not too long ago.
Yeah.
Came back when people, he was torn up, had some body parts that, weren't responding to training anymore, some nerve damage that he's since had surgery on. But it elicited the question, should a Mr. Olympia of that caliber, an 8-time Mr. Olympia, step back on stage and try to reclaim that throne? And, he ended up with a 4th place finish, which was fine and all. Does that taint the legacy of the champion in question?
It may do for a short period. It may do on the night. But actually, Ronnie going out in 4th and you interviewing before I left the stage, is a really historic moment. So I think sometimes if a champion comes back and gets beaten, it just taints it for a short while. But as history takes over, you look back a few years, you remember Ronnie as the 8-time Mr. Olympia. You don't remember him as the 4th place finisher at his last contest.
Does Jay have anything left to prove? Is there really any point to Jay, short of his own, personal ideas of maybe him wanting to get back on stage, maybe come back from injury, try to get his title back and go out on top? I mean, these are all nice scenarios, but is the reality that does Jay Cutler have anything left to prove at this point in his career?
Not to us, but maybe to himself. Here's a guy, we look upon Jay as being the golden boy, but his career hasn't been one upward curve. I mean, he won his pro card at the 96 Nationals, but he didn't win the overall.
That's right.
Willie Stalling beat him, so his career was even then stalling. His pro debut, Night of the Champions, he wasn't in the top 10. His Olympia debut wasn't in the top 10.
That's right, yeah.
But nobody's had more runner-up spots in the Olympia than him. So it's been, a real fight for him. Maybe this will give him another fight. People are saying he's done, he's finished, the bicep. Bicep isn't as serious as Branch's injury. And because it was the small head, it's not going to be disfigured, in my opinion. He can come back. It won't be like Dorian's bicep, for instance. So I think he might have something to prove to himself.
Well, I think what he needs to prove to himself at this point, Peter, is age catching up to the champ. I mean, Jay's been a consummate professional. He's been, fairly steady, obviously, in his appearances physique-wise. But he is getting closer to that 40 years of age rather than when he wanted to retire at 34, 35 years old. And the landscape changes between 38 and 40, as we've seen with champs like Dexter Jackson and Ronnie Coleman, Tony Freeman, some of these great bodybuilders that are out there.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to a break, in just a minute, Peter, but I want to get your thoughts on the state of Jay now versus 5 years ago, and whether he's looking to make it an even 4-4, as he's always wanted an equal amount of Arnold Classic victories and Olympia victories. And we're going to discuss that right after these messages.
What's up? This is Cedric McMillan. Listen, get your ass down to the MD Supplement Superstore. Peace.
All right, Peter, back from the break. We were talking about Jay Cutler undergoing surgery, possible comeback this year. I've got to ask you, though, Peter, is it going to be different for Jay Cutler this year at closer to 40 than years ago when he was closer to 30?
Well, I think what you have to take into account is that Jay's best ever, as far as I'm concerned, was only 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, 2009, where he totally reinvented himself and caused a sensation. If he can reproduce that form, he's going to be competitive with anybody.
Is it a different landscape for Jay now that he's not the champ coming in there, but we've got a new sheriff in town? Phil Heath, the gift, is now Mr. Olympia. He himself has made completely just monstrous strides over the last couple of years. But has Phil put a physique up there that Jay can still beat?
I think only if Phil doesn't come in at his best. If Phil doesn't nail his condition, I think even Jay realizes, Jay predicted this is going to be the guy that's going to take over from me.
Well, he's helped build it, in effect.
Yeah,
because obviously these guys are great friends, but as we both know, Jay has mentored Phil and have helped him with his training, and in effect, helped him to beat Jay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the way that Jay handed the title or the baton across to him at the end of the last Olympia was just the most gracious thing you've ever seen on a bodybuilding stage.
Well, Peter, Jay has always said he wanted as many Olympia victories as Arnold victories. Now, that made a lot of sense when it was 3-3. But now he's 4-3 the other way. He's got one more Olympia victory than Arnold victory. Does this set up a possible scenario that we see Jay Cutler not on the Olympia stage, but at the Arnold Classic next year?
That could be his game plan. It'll give him more time to recover from the injury. He won't have Phil Heath standing on the stage with him, I wouldn't think, at the Arnold Classic. So, yeah, it might be a lovely little bookend to his career.
Would that be an appropriate way for Jay to go out? If he went out, let's just say hypothetically, he took this time, healed up, was absolutely phenomenal on the Arnold stage, the 25th anniversary of the Arnold, I remind you, which would be a nice venue for a Jay Cutler to come back, and he wins his 4th Arnold Classic title. Is that a good time to hang him up and sail off into the sunset, or does that just give him the impetus to maybe go back into the Olympia and try to get that title from Phil Heath?
Well, I mean, next year's Arnold's going to have a really historic theme about it. So maybe that will be a place for Jay to make history. Who knows? I mean, we thought he'd be done at 34. We've seen a lot of sportsmen go on past what was the prime. But I would have thought if he'll be 40 next year, so I would have thought that would be the time to maybe go on to pastures new.
Well, Tony Freeman may argue that point because he seems to be getting better and better as he gets older. But we'll talk. Maybe we'll ask Tony about his impressions on that in a future segment because him, Dexter, a lot of these old veterans still out there waving the flag and still looking pretty good. So we'll keep tabs on Jay throughout the year and perhaps maybe even have him on the show in the future, and he can tell us himself what he's looking to do. With that, let's spend the next 2 minutes and 22 seconds talking about the 212, which was the 202, which started out as the 210.
In 222 seconds.
That's right.
Right.
Now in 2012, we've actually changed that to the 212 class now.
Okay.
Are you following this?
Barely, but do go on.
Here's what we got, Peter. We created this class a few years ago. It started out as the 210. We made some adjustments, went down to 202. Now we've actually adjusted to 212, which I think is a good move. But the bigger question, of course, is the class necessary, Peter? This is something I personally have championed, and I could see a need for this because you don't see a whole lot of middleweights winning overall titles these days at the national and USA levels. So I think it's a good thing, but your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it keeps more guys in the sport. You know, there are a lot of guys weighing around 200 pounds. They're not going to be really competitive in an open class with 260-pound guys. The byproduct of it for me, though, is the last years that we've seen, the 202, the conditioning of those guys has been much better than in the open class because they actually have the, they have to make a weight limit,
sure.
So that's an extra discipline for them. They can't just say, oh, I'll be all right on the day.
Well, I tell you this, from my perspective, I'm not so sure the short guy ever really had a chance. I mean, we saw, they had weight classes, height classes even back in the day, but it was all pretty much the same thing. But, Franco never beat Arnold. The short class winner never beat the tall class winner. A good big man will always beat a good short man, as the old saying goes. Yeah. I think it's great for business. I think it's good for the guys that are out there that they can compete on a level playing field. Because let's face it, Peter, the field has changed over the years. Back in the days, let's say even in the early 80s, these guys were relatively close in weight. We didn't have guys on the stage at 260, 270 pounds in contest shape back then. Now we can argue the merits of if that physique's a better physique for a different show. But the bottom line is it's very difficult to be competitive when you're giving up that kind of muscle.
Absolutely. One guy who was competitive, he's probably the exception to that, was Sean Ray. I mean, we see guys 210 pounds now going into the open class and being overpowered. Sean Ray weighed 202, probably his heaviest, and yet he wasn't overpowered by Yates and Dillard and NASA. There's a remarkable physique.
Well, we've seen some exceptions. I mean, Sean Ray certainly comes to mind. Yeah. Labrada with his classical physique, comes to mind. But then it gets a little dicey. I mean, Dexter Jackson, obviously a guy who went on to win, but Dexter's not a small guy. I mean, you're talking about he might be shorter, but Dexter had the capacity to put on that kind of a muscle. He didn't look like a 210 guy or 212 guy or anything even close. And it was probably arguably in the 220s when he won the Olympia. But clearly the exception, not the rules, from how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, and Dexter started off as a bantamweight, which is a remarkable story. He's 100 pounds of muscle or something he's gained in his career.
But Peter, we're going to take a break right now. When we come back, we've got a brand new segment we're going to be finishing with, and that, of course, is The Last Word.
Hey guys, this is Branch Warren. Check out the MD Supplement Superstore.
All right, we're back from the break. Peter, just a few short announcements before we move on with the segment. I will be back on the road again. Jack and Antoni's NPC Midwest competition. That's in St. Louis, Missouri on St. Patrick's Day. And these guys are absolutely crazy out there. They've got all kinds of nuttiness involved here with St. Patrick's Day. So if you're in that area and you want tickets, npcmidwest.com. Kai Green making a special appearance there. So come on out. We'd love to have you. It's going to be a full sold-out auditorium, I'm told. A few tickets are still left, and we'll see you all there. Peter, I know you're big into the social media these days, so I'd like to give a few shout-outs. You can catch us on YouTube at The Last Rep Show channel, Facebook, The Last Rep with Bob Ciccarello. Good luck spelling that. And Twitter at The Last Rep Show, and, of course, our good friends over at musculardevelopment.com. So you can see us everywhere, Peter.
Good. And we'll see you in St. Louis Saturday night. With Kai being there, there'll be a whole lot of green on view.
Hey, look at that, Peter, with a good one. Well, Peter, given that you've got some of the wittiest remarks I've ever heard, I'm going to give you a brand new segment that we're calling The Last Word.
I wonder if you're like me, a little bit teed off, maybe even pissed off at some of the posing routines we're seeing in modern bodybuilding. All too often a guy comes out to some screeching music that sounds like it was made in a steelworks or something, lurches around the stage, puts his hand behind his ear asking for applause to the audience. Why would he ask the audience for a response if he's not getting one? You didn't get Laurence Olivier leaning towards the theatre goers at the climactic death scene in Hamlet and saying, "How about a little hand for an old thespian?" With the majority of routines, there's no synchronicity between the bodybuilder's movements and the music. It's just scattered all over the place. He needs to perform a choreographed routine where he hits his best poses in tandem with the highlights of a soundtrack. Why a bodybuilder wouldn't show his physique to his best advantage against stirring music is beyond me. The reality is, a bodybuilder trains for years to build that physique, diets for months to sculpt it, and then comes out and doesn't showcase his physique properly. It's a little bit like Manny Pacquiao enduring a brutal training camp and then turning up on fight night with one hand tied behind his back. There's a scene in Pumping Iron where Arnold turns to Danny Padilla whilst they watch Ed Corney pose and says, "Now that's what I call posing." I'd love that sentence to be uttered at bodybuilding shows in the future. And that's my last word.
All right, Peter, well, thank you for the last word. Very insightful, my friend, as always. Laurence Olivier?
It's English, goddammit.
Ah, well, that explains that. All right, well, with that, we're going to close out this edition of The Last Rep. For Peter McGuff, I'm Bob Ciccarello, and we need
Bob
a tagline.
Ciccarello.
We need a tagline, Peter. We need a finish, like, you know, from the last rep to the first set, or good night from me to you.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you got anything?
Good night, Gracie. No.
Nah, that doesn't
gonna
work. I'll tell you what we're going to do, because we keep it real on this set, Peter. I'm going to go out to you, the viewing public, to come up with a finish line for us, big tagline at the end to finish off the show. So with that, Peter,
They'll probably suggest that we use that finish line in the first minute of the show, so be careful what you ask for.
Here we go. All right, well, I'm going to put it out to the people out there, Peter. I have confidence in what they're going to do. So with that, I'm going to sign it off to you, and I'm going to put it out to my peeps over at musculardevelopment.com. I'm going to put a thread dedicated to the last final send-off on this show. See what you guys come up with, and if it's good, we'll put it right here. For Peter McGuff, I'm Bob Chick. We're out.